All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. Today, we, the COVID communications team from Northwestern, are really excited to answer some of your questions and do a little bit of background about the science of COVID-19. So I'll hand it off to Xavier, who will be our presenter today, who will give a little presentation about the science. And yeah, take it away, Xavier.
Thank you, Frank. And so once again, my name is Xavier Anderson, and today I'll be giving a presentation on the science of COVID. So once again, my name is Xavier Anderson, and I am part of the COVID communications team. And today I'll be going over the science of COVID as well as the understanding how vaccines work. And so before I get started into the presentation, I would like to just say that this COVID communications team is made up of biology PhD students from Northwestern University, which is in Evanston, Illinois. And today we have a humongous team, and we have all, participated and produced this, produced as well as read a lot of literature to create this presentation, as well as to be able to answer these questions in a understandable way for the general public. And today the moderators are Xavier, and as well as Emily. And we, oh, my bad, that's what I said though. Today the panelists are me, Xavier, as well as Emily, and that the moderators will be Elijah as well as Frank. And I will get started. So first, what is DNA and RNA? So DNA is a genetic material that makes us who we are. It gives us our complexion, our hair color, the way we look. It's important for making us individually unique and giving us all our unique characteristics. Next, we have mRNA, which are the short instructions from our DNA used to make proteins. And it also provides the instruction to make proteins as well as perform key functions that keep us alive and functioning. And so one way you can look at this is that DNA is like an instruction manual, right? So you have this big old instruction manual, and let's say you want to make something very specific. What you would do is take a piece of that instruction manual, take a piece of that instruction, depending on what you're trying to build. And this would be, in the case of mRNA, the short version of this big instruction manual. And so what you can do with this smaller, shorter piece of the instruction manual is to build whatever you need to make whatever you need. And so you can think of it as, I guess, the pathway of how proteins are made in your body. So you have your big instruction manual chopped up into a small instruction manual, and this allows you to make whatever you need, your final product. And therefore in a cell, it would be a protein. And so what are viruses? So viruses are these viruses practically hijack your cell's machinery to produce more of itself. And one thing that is important about these viruses is that without your cells, they cannot replicate. So they need your cells to survive and strive. And so practically in the presence of, or once your cell has been taken over by a virus, what happens is that there's a bunch of virus proteins that are circulating throughout your cell and throughout your body. And in response, your immune system recognizes that there's something, or your body recognizes that there's something foreign. And so it activates the immune response. And once your immune response is activated, there's certain things that your body would do, such as increasing your body temperature before you have a fever to try to, raise the temperature to a certain level. Therefore, the virus can't work properly. It starts with inflammation as well as activating your immune system to produce certain antibodies that are required for, destroying this virus. And so now it comes to the question of what is COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2. So we heard about these names before. They're all over the news. So COVID-19 is the actual illness. So it's the symptoms that you have, such as the coughing and the shortness of breath. And SARS-CoV-2 is the actual virus that causes the illness, specifically COVID-19. And SARS-CoV-2 stands for Severe Active Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. And what you can see is that the virus is primarily composed of viral RNA in the inside, and around the outside, it has these spike proteins. And you can think of these spike proteins as like a key. And this key specifically allows it to have access to your cell. So once this key is shown to the cell, it is able to, inject itself into the cell, therefore taking over your cell's machinery and producing replicates of itself, which can spread to other cells and take over your body. And so once once your body is or once your body has these viruses throughout, it undergoes a variety of different symptoms. And some of these symptoms that you might undergo is coughing, fever, chills, muscle pain, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, as well as a sore throat and a loss of taste or smell. And we have heard these. The pandemic has been going on a while, but this is just uh, to just say once again that these are the main symptoms. And one thing that's really interesting that these symptoms are very similar to what you get with like a common cold. And so many people might think they just have a cold and keep on going with their daily activities, but in actuality, you might actually have COVID. And so if you do have any of these symptoms, it's very nice to get tested just to make sure of just to make yourself sure that you don't have COVID-19. And so now that we know what coronavirus is and what COVID-19 is, how do we fight it? And so there are three things that we have all heard about it, and these can be taken as the three W's. So the first one is watch your distance, especially when you're in public or especially when you're in public, make sure you have a certain distance away from you and whoever else you're speaking to or interacting with. The next one is wash your hands, and then the last one is always wear a mask. And so, following these three W's will significantly keep you healthy throughout this pandemic. And another thing that we can also look forward to is the production of vaccines. So I guess throughout the past like 4 or 5 months, vaccines have been rolling out, and this leads to the question of what are vaccines and how do they work? So the definition of vaccines are that they are a safe and effective way to train your immune system to identify and destroy a specific disease-causing microorganism. And so within the vaccine, or I guess what is inside the vaccine? So what scientists have done is take this spike protein, which is the key that allows it to have access to your cell, break this spike protein into smaller fragments, and then break it down further into smaller instructions, such as mRNA instructions or DNA instructions. And then the virus or the vaccine, whether you get the mRNA version of the vaccine, which is from Moderna or Pfizer, or the DNA version, which is from Johnson & Johnson. So both these vaccines contain these ingredients or these instructions that when injected into your body, allow your cells to utilize these instructions to produce these small spike protein fragments. And once these fragments are inside your body recognizes that there's some type of foreign material inside your body. And so that it activates the immune system. And with this activation of the immune system, your body starts producing antibodies, which are able to bind and recognize the spike protein fragments, as well as C cells or T cells, excuse me, which are able to destroy the spike protein. And so with that in mind, after this, I guess, infectious period is depleted, or after all these spike protein fragments are depleted in your body, what happens is that your body produces a memory cell that is able to, I guess, keep this antibody that was specific for that spike protein fragment inside your body. So whenever you have a run-in with the actual COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 virus, what happens is that your body already has these memory cells ready and active. And so what happens is that they will produce a response, increasing the amount of antibodies produced, and therefore allowing the immune response to be quicker, as well as a stronger immune response. And so you won't be as impacted by the virus if you have the vaccine, whether to not have the vaccine. And so with that in mind, we can now talk about the different types of vaccines out there available to the public. And so there are three types of vaccines. You have the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. Pfizer and Moderna are both RNA and RNA vaccines, while Johnson & Johnson is DNA. And both Pfizer and Moderna require 2 doses, where Johnson & Johnson requires 1 dose. And one thing that's interesting is that with the 2 doses, whether you get Pfizer or Moderna, you have this time to immunity. So practically after 14 days after your second dose, you are technically have immunity to SARS-CoV-2. And with Johnson & Johnson, it takes about 29 days after your first vaccine to have immunity to SARS-CoV-2. And so with that in mind, I would like to take your eyes toward this this red box, which goes over vaccine efficacy. What vaccine efficacy is practically the protection that you have against the specific virus, therefore SARS-CoV-2. And so with these the vaccines, what you can see is that Moderna and Pfizer both have relatively high efficacy since they're double doses. They have about 94 to 95% protection against SARS-CoV-2. But with Johnson & Johnson, since it's one dose, you have a little bit less protection, but it's still a good enough protection that is worthwhile. And so with vaccine efficacy, it can be further broken down into three different, I guess, trials, you could say, or three different conditions. So one is how well are these vaccines in preventing symptomatic COVID, which is like the normal COVID that we hear about with the symptoms such as coughing or wheezing and shortness of breath. Then how well are these vaccines at preventing severe COVID or hospitalization, which I always say is like life-threatening. And so what you can see is that if you have the vaccine, or you can see that with Pfizer and Moderna, they both are 95% effective at preventing symptomatic COVID, while Johnson & Johnson is about 72% effective. If we look at how effective these vaccines are at severe COVID, what we can see is that both Pfizer and Moderna have about 100% effectiveness against severe COVID. And then looking further at hospitalization or life-threatening symptoms, what you can see is that all three vaccines have 100% effectiveness against severe hospitalization or life-threatening symptoms. Excuse me. And I guess the overall summary of this graph would be that they're all extremely, no matter what vaccine you get, they're all extremely important at decreasing the amount of severity that COVID can have on your body and the symptoms that they can cause to you. So with that in mind, what can you do once you're immunized? And practically, this has been out for a while, and really it hasn't been anything that people have not been doing. But what you can do once you're immunized is that once you're indoors, you can kind of be around other immunized people without a mask. If you are indoors with another unvaccinated person, you cannot, or you have the ability to not wear a mask. And then once you are exposed to this virus, or once you have gotten with COVID-19 after your vaccine, you aren't required to quarantine post-exposure. But what stays the same is that if you go anywhere in the public, if you go anywhere in a public outing or a public area, you still have to wear a mask and social distance. You still have to avoid large gatherings as well as traveling. And if you do have symptoms, make sure you take precaution and understanding, or make sure you take precautions in what you do for the next couple of days until you are once again get rid of those symptoms. And so the question arises as, how does life return to normal? And so one thing, or I guess one word that has been thrown around a lot is like herd immunity. So herd immunity is when a large part of the population is immune to a specific disease, and this immunity allows for the prevention of the virus, right? And so, I guess, what is herd immunity? So herd immunity is when you have a population of infected people that is when you have a vulnerable community that has a population of these infected people. And so after a while, these infected people start to build up this immune response, and this immune response allows them to be immune to the virus, right? And so once these infected people become immune, what you have is that you now change the community from a vulnerable community to a protected community, in which you have a majority of the population who are immune to the virus, but you also still have some people that are susceptible and some people that are still infected. So in the long run, this protected community will reduce the amount of people that have the virus, and sooner or later, once everybody is immune to the virus will slowly die out of this specific community. So that's one thing that the United States is trying to do with the mass vaccines. And as of now, that is the end of my presentation, and I will pass it on to David for the quick announcement.
Hi, I'm David. I'm the site coordinator from Bensonville School District. And we just have some information for parents and anybody that's interested. We will have the link available for anyone that needs it. There will be a pre-registration form that will be available on Mondays and only open on Mondays after 10 a.m. For vaccines at St. Alexis on Thursdays. Like I said, we will have more information with the link.
Thank you. And with that, we will now go into a live Q&A session. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, great. Thank you for that great presentation, Xavier, and thank you, David and Bensonville, for having us. So we can just get started with addressing some questions that people might have. So there's been a lot of talk about vaccines. I think that's sort of the main topic that's on people's mind. So on that topic, one question is, what is the likeliness of a yearly booster needed after getting your vaccine?
So I can jump in and answer that one. As of now, the simplest answer to give is we don't know. And that's basically because right now, there's a lot of ongoing research that's being done to basically figure out the efficacy of these vaccines. As of now, we don't really know for sure how effective they'll be in a year. Lately, or at least recently, the CEO of Pfizer said that there is a chance we may need some sort of booster within the next 12 months. But as I mentioned before, studies are still ongoing, so there's no clear answer as for that. And we're still waiting for guidance as to the efficacy of these vaccines.
Yeah, and speaking of like timelines and waiting, another question we got is, how soon can my child be vaccinated?
Yeah, I can go and take this, Emily. So as of now, the guidelines still say that the youngest, I guess, person that can get the vaccine has to be 16. But as of now, they are looking into decreasing the age to children as young as 12, and there are ongoing clinical trials as of now, utilizing children at the age of 12 as well as younger children such as 6 months old to see how these vaccines can be given to younger people. So as of now, I don't know when exactly people can actually, I guess people younger than 16 can actually get the vaccine, but it is in the works.
Let's see. So a question we had going around from parents in our district was that what would happen if you get the first vaccine shot, but you do not get the second vaccine shot? Like, is there a process? Do you have to wait a certain amount of time to get it again? Or what do you guys think?
Well, we highly recommend everyone to follow the 2-dose course for Pfizer and Moderna that has been approved by the FDA and CDC. So if you can get both doses, we highly suggest you follow that. As of, if you have a delay or lapse in your 2 doses, I don't know if there's any official guidance on how to proceed with that as of now. So maybe you should ask your doctor or maybe look through the CDC website and see what they say. Yeah, but as much as humanly possible, follow the 2-dose schedule or one. Well, it's not 1-dose schedule for J&J, but the 2-dose schedule for Pfizer and Moderna.
Yeah, I think the CDC does have some guidance of like a time window where you can get away. Like it doesn't have to be 3 or 4 weeks exactly, but I don't have the exact like time frame of what that window might be.
Thank you.
So another interesting question that has come up is, how did such rapid vaccine development actually occur, and is it safe? It's sort of an unprecedented thing for a vaccine to be developed from beginning to end in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, so I can address this one quickly. First and foremost, COVID-19 is very similar to ones that we've actually seen before in terms of SARS and MERS. So basically, scientists weren't starting from scratch. They weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. And another thing is usually there is a threshold number of infected persons that's needed to actually finish studies. But in the case of a pandemic that was affecting so many people all across the world, that number was reached very quickly. So action was just taken very rapidly. Also, there was a lot of funding from government sources and other sources as well that really contributed, and that was around the world. So that's just a few reasons for why it was so rapidly produced. And in terms of its safety, yes, they are safe, which recent studies have shown time and time again. Of course, there continue to be ongoing clinical trials and studies for various age groups, but overall guidance is telling us that yes, these vaccines are safe and you should get them when given the opportunity.
I think another important thing to note is that, you know, even though it was developed very rapidly for many of the reasons that Emily stated, you know, none of the corners were cut. So it was not like they were sacrificing quality over time because there was a global pandemic. It was, you know, every benchmark was made and the science was pretty clear that it worked really well and it was very safe.
All right. So another topic, especially in the news right now, is the circulation of variants around. You know, whether it's the strain from the United Kingdom or strain from South Africa. So the question is, or from the panel is, even with the variants running around, should people even bother continuing to get vaccinated?
I can handle this question. So to be very short and quick, it would be yes. If you just because there are a variety of different variants traveling around does not mean that that should stop you from getting a vaccine. So far, the data has come out that these vaccines are able to, I guess, that these vaccines are able to work against these types of variants. But since these variants are rapidly adapting and changing, the way I see it is that if you have all these viruses out there, and if you have a chance to get a vaccine to stop you from getting one of these diseases, it's better than waiting when and not having any vaccines, and therefore you have a chance of getting impacted by all three of these different viruses or diseases. So if you do have a chance, yes, get the vaccine. It might not protect against all variants, but it's a step in the right direction, and it will protect you as well as the community around you.
Additionally, like by these variants actually arise from unfaithful duplication of you know, of the virus in your body. So actually, with the increase of infections, we have an increased chance of more variants arising. So, you know, the best way to protect ourselves from that is by getting vaccinated so we can't get infected, or there's a low likelihood of us being impacted by the virus, and therefore the virus can't really replicate as well, and therefore we lower the chances of more variants arising that can evade our immune system and evade the vaccine protection.
So here's an interesting question. It has to do with herd immunity. And the question is basically, would it have been possible to reach herd immunity without any vaccines, especially considering the presence of all these variants? Would herd immunity just continue to elude us as variants continue to pop up?
So I can take this one. Well, basically, as X said in his presentation, we need about 70 to 90% of the population to be to reach immunity so that we can actually get this herd immunity. But I think, you know, this really stems from the fact that there are two main ways in terms of becoming immune. The first, and I think most common way, is you get infected and then you're able to recover and feel better. And the other way is that you get a vaccine. But without vaccines, we would only have to rely on people getting infected. So basically, the fact that we have vaccines, we're able to get ahead of that curve and reach that herd immunity faster. Whereas if we're just waiting on everyone to get sick first and then start feeling better, it would take much longer to achieve that herd immunity. And that's why vaccines are so important and why you should definitely get one if you're given the chance.
So a question about the vaccine itself. Can the vaccines alter your DNA?
I can take that question. So I guess going back to the model, if y'all remember, practically your DNA is encapsulated in this organelle called the nucleus, right? And so for the vaccine to actually be able to impact your genome, it would have to first have access to your nucleus, which it doesn't have. It needs a certain enzyme that allows it to have, or a certain, I guess, a certain receptor that allows it to interact with the nucleus and allows it to enter. So long story short, no, it cannot actually alter your genome. There is actually no way for it to interact with your DNA. And so when injecting your body, it actually replicates in your cytoplasm. So no, it has no way to impact your genome.
So to continue on the topic of vaccines, a lot of people have been getting their vaccines and their second shots recently. And so why is it that people seem to report that the side effects for their second shot is often worse than the side effects for their first shot?
So that goes back to something that X mentioned in his presentation as well. That has to do with the spike protein, remember, that we found on the outside of the virus itself. So basically, you have more of these symptoms or whatever after your second dose, typically because your immune system recognizes that virus spike protein. And as a result, basically your body recognizes it and then has a faster immune response. That's the simplest answer rather than going into all of the information about how your immune system works. But basically, it's just your body's response to already recognizing it and having an immediate, faster, worse response, typically, and not for everybody, even.
So in regards to the vaccine, so with that, what if you don't have an immune response after the second dose? Let's say you get your second shot, you report no symptoms. Does that mean the vaccine didn't work, or how does that happen?
So I can take that. No, it does not mean that the vaccine didn't work. Everybody's body is different and everybody's immune system is different. So just because your body didn't give you like some type of impact that you could feel does not mean the vaccine didn't work. It just means that your body handled that, I guess, viral particle in a different way, and that it didn't produce like a visible effect that you could feel. But no, it does not mean that the second dose did not work.
So when someone gets vaccinated, they're protected from the virus. Does that also mean that the people around them are protected? Does it prevent a vaccinated person from transmitting the virus to other people? How much do we know about that?
Yeah, so basically, in regards to this one, when you get the actual vaccine, as X also mentioned in the presentation, right, you're less likely to end up in a hospital or have these really severe symptoms of COVID. However, it doesn't make you any, it still doesn't fully protect you from actually transmitting it to other people. And so that's why you should still take those precautions with those 3 W's, those having your distance and all those other things, right? So it still does have you be able to actually transmit the virus. And that's, I think, the main takeaway. I think that answered the main question, right? Yeah.
So you guys talk about, we know about, the vaccines can protect us from the virus and potentially keep you out of the hospital, but is there any chance that there could be a potential longer term side effect of these vaccines that we don't know about yet?
I can take that question. Yeah, there is a potential chance. This is the first time we're using RNA vaccines, and so that's the one reason. The second reason is that we produce these in such a rapid amount of time that we still we still don't know, I guess, in the long run, how these vaccines will impact our body. So it's more of an ongoing type of problem that we will have to deal with if that time ever comes. So it's a maybe. We don't actually know if they do or do not cause these unforeseen health issues. And if it does happen, it happens.
Yeah. One other thing to note is that at least from the research I've seen in the history of like vaccines being introduced, whether it's 100 years ago or now, there's very rarely has there ever been a reaction from a vaccine that happened 2 or 3 months after you got the dose. So just from the history of vaccines, we know that a super long-term side effect isn't very likely. But again, we're still kind of like waiting out to see. But at least in the history of vaccines, there haven't been that reported longer term side effects that even go like the idea of what if it has an effect 5 years from now. Typically that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I want to add that there are many vaccine tracking groups and health groups that are on looking at all the vaccines, not just COVID-19. Of course, we're looking at COVID-19 now, but there are global vaccine tracking groups that look to see if there are patients that have these mass side effects, 3-4 years beyond after getting vaccines. And as Elijah mentioned, so far, there has been none since the history of all vaccines that we've seen that a random side effect pops up 3-4 years down the line. And that being said, also, this is the first time that we've had an mRNA vaccine, but, this is built on decades and decades of mRNA vaccine research. So it is the first time being used in the general public, but it is definitely not the first time it's being studied, the first time being observed, but only this time not from a lab setting. So yeah.
And so to continue on that topic, a common question that tends to pop up is, can vaccines cause autism? I know that's sort of a common rumor that goes around. So would anyone like to address that?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us probably have strong opinions on this one, but just quick history lesson. So there was a guy named Andrew Wakefield, and he's the one who published the study saying that there was some link from vaccines to autism. And I just want to say very loudly for everybody that that study has been debunked. He's lost his medical license time and time again. There have been various studies that have misproven or disproven that entire study. Another thing to mention is the fact that that study also had only 12 people that were tested, which is a very, very small sample size. Also, there were a lot of ethical things that he really didn't pay attention to. There was just a lot of cherry picking certain data in order to make certain conclusions that were time and time again proven to be false. So long story short, no, vaccines do not cause autism and there is no link.
Yeah, another thing to add is that, Andrew Wakefield just miraculously also happened to have the cure for autism after he published the study. And I think most of us kind of can know that today there is no such thing. So, by association, you can tell that the study is not very truthful. And for many of the reasons that Emily said, he had a lot of ethical concerns and obviously violated his Hippocratic Oath, which led to him being deboarded and restripped of his medical license. And if you actually try to get a copy of that published article today, every single one says retracted on it, which means that it's false to the point where they take it back. The journal takes the article back. So basically showing how seriously wrong his study, quotation marks, I won't even glorify it as a study, was.
I had another question that would piggyback off of that one a little bit. So there have been questions and rumors about the vaccine as well that say that it may cause infertility in people in the long run. Is there anything that you guys can answer about that question?
I don't think there's been any study that's been able to link so far, any published study that we've been able to see. So I'd say, weigh the risk of, potentially getting infertility in the future if you believe that to be true, versus the risk of getting COVID and having all these horrible side effects, and also this long-term effect on your pulmonary, cardiac, neurological systems, that we know COVID does impact, and also the effect and the risk of potentially dying due to just COVID and spreading it to your loved ones, and to other vulnerable people. So so far there has been no studies, but if that is a concern of yours, do weigh the risks.
And with that, I'll be asking, are there any lasting questions that the audience has? Okay. If not, then I would like to thank everybody here on stage with me, the moderators and the panelists, as well as David and Jesus for organizing this. Thank you for giving us the opportunity, and thank you for all the great questions, everyone.
Thank you for having us, CMSA and Bensonville District.
Thank you guys. It was really well put, or like everything was really well put. So I'm pretty sure if once we get parents tomorrow, this is going to be really good information for them.